美国好像真的在准备跟 CCP 打战哦。
Saddle up, lock and load.
And it seems it's gonna go down way before the 2027 endgame date. Hey, 不要误会哦，我不是要让你害怕 because this word ain't coming from me and it ain't coming from a former US official. It's coming from a current 4-star admiral and US commander who during a recent US congressional hearing just happened to casually mention that America needs to be ready for war way before the 2027 endgame date. And if you're still one of those who's completely mixed up about whether or not the US is gonna help Taiwan, by the time you watch this video, the answer will be crystal clear. But in the name of getting all mixed up, why don't you go ahead and get yourself a special 好机车 mixed bag of 爆米花 and join me as we all say it together. 真的是代志大条。Okay, so after our previous video dropped regarding former and retired military professionals talking about just how critical 2027 was, there were quite a few in the comments retorting some stuff like,
但是那些人他们目前没有跟政府有关系了，他们已经退休了啊，所以美国一定不会帮助台湾啦。What's wrong with you?
Now, although that sounds quite cunty, it also is actually quite reasonable. So let's see what the current U.S. officials are saying right now.
We held a hearing on the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command and the U.S. Force Korea. At the outset, I want to thank Admiral Paparo and General Brunson for their distinguished service to our country. Last year at this hearing, I said that the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific was shifting in China's favor. Since then, the Chinese Communist Party has significantly increased its coercive activity toward Taiwan and the Philippines. Last week, the Chinese conducted an exercise called Straight Thunder 2025A. This exercise demonstrated the extent to which the People's Liberation Army could execute a maritime blockade of Taiwan and pummel it with missile strikes. As China conducts more exercises with Taiwan in mind, it also escalates the rhetoric against the island. Last week, Chinese military officials called Taiwan's democratically elected president a parasite. The Chinese have also substantially increased their harassment of our Filipino allies. China's vast maritime militia, backed by the PLA Navy and Chinese Coast Guard, is using increasingly aggressive tactics to advance its expansive claims in the South China Sea.
So this hearing took place last month, mainly featuring testimony from active military leaders about next year's defense budget. The 2026 military spending plan tops $1 trillion, the largest in American history.
Holy moly.
By looking at where America plans to allocate these funds, we can get an insight into the nation's strategic priorities and intentions.
We've talked a lot here about the threat that China poses to Taiwan and what you're doing to try to address that threat. I'd like you to explain why that threat is so severe. You know, some people might look at the map and say, well, Taiwan is a small island and it's really far from us and it's really close to them. And China has marched into Tibet in the past, and they've marched into Hong Kong in the past, and that was bad, and they shouldn't have done those things. But it didn't lead to a world war, and it didn't lead to Great Depression. On the other side, you've got one of your ancestors, so to speak, Douglas MacArthur, who said at the dawn of the Korean War that the domination of Taiwan by an unfriendly power would be a disaster of utmost importance to the United States. He was speaking then, as we do today, of Communist China. Ian Easton, a Naval War College professor and one of the military's leading experts on Taiwan, says that it's possible that the Chinese invasion of Taiwan would cause a 21st century version of the Great Depression, and the famed investor Ken Griffin put it more bluntly, it's an immediate Great Depression. So why is it that Taiwan is different? Why is Taiwan such a hot flashpoint? Why could it lead not only to a catastrophic war, but also global Great Depression? Why should Americans care about an island on the other side of the world?
And then there's a question that seems to be on every Taiwanese person's mind that in this hearing was raised multiple times. 美国为什么要帮助台湾?
Many a research organization postulate that conflict in the Western Pacific over the Taiwan question would result in a 25% GDP contraction in Asia and a knock-on effect of 10 to 12% GDP reduction in the United States of America, with unemployment spiking 7 to 10 points above base and likely 500,000 excess deaths of despair above base. This is just the importance of the regional stability to the world economy and its effect on people's lives. And this is as a function of freedom of navigation. It's a function of the world dependency on semiconductors. In the longer term, For the United States, our strategic center of gravity is our network of alliances and partners. The sum total of 350 million people's talent, 130 million Japanese, 130 million Philippines, 25 million Australians, not to mention 500 million in Europe, as well as partners in across the globe. The knock-on effect of the brittleness of that network of alliances and partnerships means that some of the states could confer and submit to the PRC's mode of exploitation en route to their long-range goal of setting the rules of the world and reaping the benefits of that. And then some nations in the area of responsibility will submit, but others, it would never happen just because of the historic tensions. And in that case, the proliferation question comes to mind, with nuclear-armed states that are treaty allies with the United States and minimal warning for launch among those nuclear states. It is of vital interest for the United States. My job is to have a force ready to make those choices. You know, I don't make the choices on whether or not it's important or not. I'm explicating how it is. And my job is to present those options to the commander-in-chief to be ready to fight and win.
Translation: 我只是来跟你们讲，台湾若是打仗输掉，美国就真的完蛋了啦。要不要帮助台湾不是我在决定的，但是没有台湾后，美国也是代志大条啦。
And to be clear, a lot, if not all of those consequences would follow whatever the outcome of a conflict over Taiwan, whether China succeeds in going for the jugular or fails, or there's some kind of indecisive outcome. Simply having the conflict over Taiwan, which is such a center of gravity in the modern economy, could lead to many of the consequences you just outlined.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I can't quote the source. I will later, but most of the things I've studied indicate that American intervention would have that impact. A successful American intervention would potentially do so. So still a grave result, but half as grave with savings of a lot of human misery.
Plain English, help Taiwan or don't. Either way, America and the entire world, by matter of fact, will be fucked. But if you do decide to help Taiwan, at least America will be a lot less fucked.
While successive administrations have identified China as the pacing threat and the Indo-Pacific as the priority theater, you still identified $11 billion in unfunded priorities this past year. You talked about just now the importance of deterrence, because a conflict over Taiwan would have massive negative effects. Is some of this $11 billion having to do with the deterrence that you talked about regarding Taiwan?
Yes, Senator. Thank you. Absolutely right. Deterrence must be backed up by the real capability to fight and win. The United States of America enjoys key advantages in space, counterspace, command and control between the Kármán line and the surface, and undersea dominance. But that margin is shrinking, and we must regain the margin and increase the margin. And that ability to fight and win is what will make sure that our adversaries do not execute any aggression to do so.
What would happen if this very large funding gap is not addressed in this year's NDAA?
The Joint Force, the trajectory that I'm discussing continues. The Joint Force has an eroded capability to prevail. It manifests itself in lost people, in lost capability, in lost money, and in lost time. And it confers to the confidence of the PRC and inherently erodes deterrence as they see more and more, they see the potential of their prevailing in the conflict themselves and achieving their goals by aggression.
Admiral Papar, by the way, thank you for explaining to this committee the importance of the Taiwan situation, because often I get asked, why should our country care about Taiwan? So thank you for that.
So America's military budget for this year and next year are extremely crucial for us Taiwanese people. So for those of you Americans watching back home in the US, help some brothers out. Hit up your state representatives and senators and tell nigga on this shit right now.
Do it. Do it! Come on! Do it now!
So, according to the US military, Taiwan is the most important place in the entire world. Help them out and America can be less miserable by a lot. Now, I think even the dumbest of politicians know which choice to make.
No,
You're right.
Now, in the next chapter, you're going to see that not only has the war between US and China already begun, but the issue of shots fired is almost inevitable. Just as inevitable as me eating another bag of爆米花because it is oh so delicious. Followed up by 超级拉长一句话，代际多屌。
So, Admiral Paparo, how much of your time do you spend trying to anticipate or counter actions by Communist China?
Senator Scott, that consumes my duties, which is a constant stare, the constant analysis of intelligence sources, of open source sources, and then the physical movement on the ground to be able to see and understand, to anticipate, and to be able to pace their actions that look to coerce Taiwan and to bring to demonstrate the prospect of settling the matter by force, and number two, their encroachment on treaty allies in the Philippines, as well encroachment on partners in the South China Sea with their excessive and illogical claims in their 9-dash line claim.
And their continuing ability to build ships, airplanes, weapons, all these things, does that cause you to spend more time and money?
Yes, sir, absolutely. They built combatants at the rate of 6 to 1.8 to the United States. Right. And I could go through every force element that we're talking about.
4-star Admiral Samuel Paparo, the current commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. He's basically this generation's General MacArthur. And just how MacArthur made crucial decisions regarding World Wars I, II, and the Korean War, Paparo will be the one to decide how to defend Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific against China's attacks.
So I want to talk a little bit about attacks on digital infrastructure by the PRC. So, Admiral, our growing concern about the vulnerability of Taiwan's digital infrastructure is highlighted by the frequent attempted sabotage of undersea internet cables. These events are part of a larger trend of gray zone operations where actions short of war, often involving non-military forces or proxies, are used to exert pressure or destabilize regions. The PRC's reckless, coercive, and aggressive activities pose a threat to democracies around the globe, and its sabotage of those undersea cables has emerged as a particularly alarming tactic. These cables are essential for our global communications, transmitting around 95% of global internet traffic. They facilitate financial transactions, bolster our security, the security of our partners and allies. Admiral, while some experts view incidents like the damage to Taiwan's undersea cables as merely a test or low-level enhancement, others warn they could be part of a broader Chinese strategy to prepare for future coercion or even invasion of Taiwan. So given this, what do you see as the actual threat these incidents pose to U.S. national security, and what steps is the U.S. taking to effectively counter these digital threats?
Now, when these fools cut Taiwan's undersea cables, I figured America wouldn't even raise an eyebrow. But not only has this been brought up in several consecutive hearings, it's borderline being considered an act of war and is a driving factor in Congress's uptick in pro-Taiwan funding.
Senator Rosen, as ever, you're quite astute in identifying this threat. Most certainly, that's an element of the intention and an element of the design. They would do so likely with People Armed Forces Maritime Militia, which enables them to execute this operation without potentially signaling an intent to go to war, but by weakening the information enterprise of the states over whom they're executing aggression. And I think the first is that the ability to penetrate from an intelligence standpoint and to be there in the locations where they would be otherwise cutting those cables in order to deter that activity. Second of all is the resilience to have other redundant networks that enable those states and their partners, including the United States, Guam, Hawaii, and so forth, to achieve what we need to do in the information environment, and that's proliferation in low Earth orbit, and not just one single constellation, but multiple constellations.
Talk about how we can help Taiwan bolster its digital infrastructure. What do you think we can do to help them be sure?
Yeah, I think training them to be able to, I shouldn't say training them, but enabling them to build that resiliency that's required, that if we're unsuccessful in our efforts to thwart their cable cutting, that there are other spectra and other means for information technology, so they have the proper bandwidth to to prioritize those functions that they have to within that bandwidth and latency that you get out of low Earth orbit, middle Earth orbit, among the many commercial constellations that are going into orbit.
It looks like the U.S. military is taking the cable cutting issue very seriously. And in the event of a U.S.-China war, I think Elon's Starlink just might be ready for action in Taiwan. Because Taiwan ain't Ukraine, yo. Taiwan has direct benefits for Elon Musk's robotic industry.
So I've long been very concerned about the Chinese presence at the Panama Canal and what they might be able to do with that if, heaven forbid, something were to happen. Could you just elaborate a little bit on how the closure of that, let's just assume that that would happen, the closure of that or an interruption in its availability, how that would affect the flow of both combatants and support vessels to the region?
Senator, I mean, inherently the geography, the alternative being all the way south around the Horn, that's about a 2-week transit. Think about how critical it is to get forces on front when the PRC's intention is a short, sharp war that provides a fait accompli to the international community. And so inherently anything that slows us down over time and distance is bad for us. Now consider that all of the shipbuilding in the United States of America is east of the Panama Canal, but the preponderance of the threat is in the Pacific. And that just shows the inherent logic of the requirement for the Panama Canal as ever.
Now, remember when Trump suddenly said he wanted to take back the Panama Canal? It seemed pretty wild at first, but from Taiwan's perspective, it kind of makes sense. However, one thing to be very careful about. Before 2027, if a Chinese cargo ship runs aground in the Panama Canal, like the previous incident with a Taiwanese ship in the Suez Canal, paralyzing U.S. military reinforcement routes, such moments require very special attention from the Taiwanese people. But America has also thought of a plan B that doesn't involve the Panama Canal.
Quickly, I just would like to ask for your impression of the importance of the AUKUS framework in the Indo-Pacific.
AUKUS is it's going to confer a generational advantage on both countries, but I cherish the advantage it confers on the United States of America. And so, I'll say, first of all, the ability to operate out of Sterling in submarine rotational force west in Sterling gives the American submarine force an Indian Ocean port. It gives us the ability to range the Indian Ocean without limitation in the Straits of Malacca, the Lombok, or the Sunda Strait. It's a straight shot to the South China Sea, closer and faster than Hawaii, San Diego, Bangor, Maine, and then Australia's contribution into the Defense Industrial Base. $3 billion investment in the submarine defense industrial base.
Yeah, imagine Congress having that debate about whether we would invest $3 billion in the Australian workforce. It would be a very tough discussion here.
It'd be worth it, though.
It'd be worth it.
So do you guys remember back in February when the CCP decided to hold a live fire exercise off the Australian coast without telling anybody? Needless to say, this pissed off a lot of people, resulting in quite a few Chinese netizens comparing Australia and Taiwan, discovering that Australia's land is more than twice that of Taiwan's, with less than half the size of the military. And in conclusion, it turns out invading Australia will be a lot easier than invading Taiwan.
Maybe. General Paparo, as you know, Exercise Northern Strike in Michigan brings over 6,300 participants from all across the United States, as well as our international partners to Michigan's National All-Domain Warfighting Center. It's the largest training area east of the Mississippi. In past briefings before this committee, you discussed the importance of Exercise Northern Strike to Indo-PACOM and particularly our ability to cooperate with our partners in the region. Could you elaborate on your prior comments and discuss the importance of Northern Strike to supporting Indo-PACOM's mission, please?
Senator, without giving more of the details of what's executed on Northern Strike, it is a key point of leverage. And I have this even from my interlocutors who report that those personnel that return from Northern Strike are changed. So I treasure it, and I want more of it, and I want to expand it. And, I thank the state of Michigan for their diligence in it.
Well, that's great to hear, Admiral, and happy to hear that. And yeah, you'll know that I'm actually co-sponsoring a proposal for the NDAA with Senator Slotkin to make Northern Strike permanent and funding permanent. And I certainly look forward to working with members of this committee to do that. And your words of encouragement I hope will help that process move along.
Now, aside from establishing submarine bases in Australia and giving the Philippines a shit ton of missiles and other weapons, America has also been working with other countries' militaries for joint exercises and resistance drills. And in the Northern Strike 24-2 exercise back in August of last year, guess who also participated?
Tight, yeah!
So, simply put, the US is financially prepared to go to war with China, trained to go to war with China, and mentally prepared to go to war with China. And yet some of you fools are still asking whether or not America will help Taiwan?
What's wrong with y'all?
By now, some of you have probably already written in the comments,
唢呐，你的标题有说确定2027年要打战哦，但是这个里面根本没有说关于2027年的东西呀。
You are right, because this wasn't from the same hearing. But just 4 days ago, in another military budget hearing,
we are investing in the munitions we need, particularly to be ready to if we need to go to war with China. Those are precision-guided, long-range munitions like Tomahawk, Maritime Strike Tomahawk, LRASM, SM-6, SM-2, ARGM, AIM-9X, AIM-120, and the heavyweight torpedo. So all those munitions we need to increase production on. I'm also of the mind that we need to look at other vendors, and they may not be able to produce the same exact specification, but they might be able to produce a missile that's effective, which is more effective than no missile. So I think we've got to open our aperture a little bit, but those munitions that I listed, we need to increase production. And we've done so with things like the SM-6, which used to have 125 rounds a year. We're ramping up to 300 rounds a year. We've restarted our Mark 48 line. That's our premier torpedo. We stopped doing torpedoes in 1996 and now have just reconstituted that line and are going to deliver 10 a month. So that's 120 a year. That's a step in the right direction. But we need to stop looking, like I have, at the minimum sustaining rate and look at what we need for protraction. I think it's foolish to think that we're going to be in a short, sharp war. If we go to war with China, this is going to be a big deal, and it's going to be bloody, and there's going to be casualties, and it's going to take time and munitions. So our stocks need to be full.
The U.S. will not let a long, bloody war happen on their own soil. So, guess where it will happen?
We remain committed to a strong global Navy, one that is prepared to defend our homeland, deter our adversaries, and prevail in war. We are laser focused on China as our most consequential opponent while strengthening defense of the homeland. We prioritize operations, training, and readiness accounts to ensure our naval forces remain ready, resilient, and agile to execute national tasking. The Navy and Marine Corps preserves peace through strength, through investments in our strategic deterrence, our defense industrial base, and our installations, via initiatives like the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program. Most importantly, we are continuing to have a strong commitment to our people, our sailors, our Navy families, and our civilians through pay raises, investments in quality of service initiatives, and unaccompanied housing and child care. But we are facing some challenges. First, the Navy has 23,200 gaps at sea. Thanks to process improvements and targeted investments, we are on plan to reduce that number significantly by the close of FY26. We are committed to attracting and developing Americans who can innovate, solve hard problems, and dominate in combat. The Navy contracted over 40,000 sailors last year, the most since 2003, and we are currently on pace to exceed our recruiting goal for FY25. Second, our ordnance expenditures in the Red Sea have highlighted the strain on our munitions industrial base. The Navy is working with both our traditional primes and new entrants to close this gap, developing kinetic and non-kinetic weapons at speed and at scale. And third, our platforms are not as ready as they need to be. We set an ambitious goal to make 80% of our ships, submarines, and aircraft combat surge ready by January 1st, 2027. To do that, we are reducing maintenance delays, we are improving manning, training, modernization, and sustainment. In all of these efforts, consistent and predictable funding is foundational. We appreciate the continued support of this committee.
This is the current U.S. Navy Operations Deputy Chief. Simply put, he wants to fill the troops with people and the ammunition warehouses with ammunition before 2027. Lock and load, baby, because all of this is for
China. China. I have to have my China.
Now, the U.S. has provided Taiwan with budget support, operational support, and it has even conducted military exercise with Taiwanese troops. And then there's a plan to fill warehouses with ammunition within the next 18 months. But yet, some of you are still pondering whether or not America is going to help Taiwan fight China?
What's wrong with you? You niggas are crazy!
And it would seem that everything is set to go down way before the 2027 endgame date. So you better 准备，你要准备的东西哦 because the more 准备 you are, the less likely there is to be a war. But I'm willing to bet the next 18 months are going to be the most intense in the entire world. Whew. 真的是代际多屌. But that's just me. Let me know what you think down below. Make sure you get some of this delicious 爆米花. By the way, the link is in the description. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and I will see you on the flip side.